Welcome to GRE Snack, snackable episodes about the GRE, GMAT, and graduate school admissions. I'm Tyler, the founder of Achievable, and we have an affordable GRE course that includes everything you need to ace your GRE exam. A full textbook, videos on key topics, tons of GRE questions backed by our memory enhancing algorithm, a built-in study planner and essay grader, and full-length practice exams. You can try it out for free by going to achievable.me, and if you like it, use the code podcast and you can save 10%. Now, let's get started. Today we've got Justin Grimes with Apply to Graduate School with us on the show again. I'm really happy to have you back, Justin. I'd love if you could introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be back on the show. Dr. Justin Grimes, founder and owner of Apply to Graduate School, where our mission is to make graduate education more equitable and accessible for all. We do this in three different ways. We do this through our online courses, through the book that we have 20 questions to answer before you apply to graduate school, as well as a graduate school coaching program for students and working professionals who are looking to get back into graduate school when I get back in, looking to go to graduate school and are looking for some individual support along that way.
Yeah, fantastic. And so today we're going to be talking about, hybrid and online programs because it's one of the big shifts as we go into, the internet age, right? We're starting to get up there and sort of, I guess the internet's been around most of my life and I'm in my 30s now. So
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, a lot of times I think things got burned a little bit at the beginning with online college because there were a lot of for-profit online colleges that were not that good, right? And so I think that it kind of uh, put a lot of people off of it for a while, but thanks to some regulatory changes, right, clamping down on those sort of exploitative colleges and then also just to generally people moving online, and then also generally businesses getting better at conducting their business online. I feel like these hybrid and online programs are starting to become pretty real. Uh, and for it to be real, then really like graduate school is almost like the last place that it's going to go, right? Because it's the most involved. So I'm curious, kind of, what are you seeing as far as the trends with these kind of programs in general, and then why are they becoming more popular today?
That's a really good question. So one of the things I want to do is to provide a bit of clarity around the difference between the two. Online
Mhm.
graduate programs are those programs where the coursework is entirely via the internet. So you could do this in a asynchronous way, which is a lot of the pre-recorded lectures and materials that you download on your own, and then you have deadlines and other requirements for you as a student. And then synchronous, where you're actually attending class live. And then there's still some online asynchronous components in terms of the materials, the lectures, other resources and supports that you need that you will access both from your instructor and peers. And then the hybrid graduate programs are those that blend an online component and an in person component. This may be
Mhm.
programs where you're coming in once or twice a year, or you may be coming in on weekends. You have a 2 3 day weekend requirement, maybe for licensure, maybe for a particular aspect of instruction that's needed for those who pursue this degree, or just other reasons. And then the majority of your instruction will take place via an online format, generally, like I just stated kind of previously, in the asynchronous or synchronous format. One of the things
Mhm.
that I think is growing the popularity of these programs is because of people's comfort, number one. It was a study in fall 2021, I believe, that around 61% of undergraduate students have already enrolled in at least one distance education. So that's another word you may hear it as, is distance education versus the
Mhm.
traditional in person. And so when you have that number of individuals who are already accustomed to instruction in this way, hence what happened during the pandemic when we had to make this shift, then that is
Right.
only going to see itself carry over into the online graduate school formats of graduate program instruction and dissemination. And then we also just see
Mhm.
in general, people are more accustomed to using things online. I think it's over 50% of studies show that people in the United States have done some form of online course instruction. That could be a certificate, it could be an actual course, it could be a training requirement for their employer, but they're used to doing this. And so the growing popularity, I think, is number one, again, the familiarity. The second part of it is, I think, the cost. People are looking for different cost options that may be more suitable to their
Right.
budgets. And if I had to name a third one, I would say that it is the flexibility. Oftentimes, people who work for a living or are looking to live in one place and get a degree in another place love online and hybrid options because they're not bound by being in the classroom at a particular institution every single week. And so that I think is what has caused a lot of this increase in popularity.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially too, I think that yeah, so everything you mentioned makes complete sense, but the one I want to dig into really is this idea of like flexibility and career switching. Do you feel like there's more of that lately, right? Like definitely, I mean, we see it even with our like internship program that like sometimes we get people that it's like you were like a chemical engineer for like 2 decades. Like, why are you going to be an intern, right? And they're like, they want to switch into tech or switch into something that's work from home. So I'm curious if we like what you think is kind of like driving a lot of that.
Yeah, I definitely folks are looking for flexible options. As we see the population continue to include graduate population to include more of what some might call the geriatric millennials, and a few of the Gen X and
Is
some
that
other
a word
groups.
now?
Yeah, right, like the older millennials or geriatric millennials. So I think those
Jesus.
are the people who are kind of in my age group who are in the late 30s, 40s. That is kind of what they classify as that group. And so that group is looking for something a little bit different. As people are having families, people are working for a living and trying to figure out how to make school fit within their life. The idea of
Mhm.
going to the traditional brick and mortar isn't as appealing for folks, especially when you look at the way programs are
Well,
marketed now. They're like, I see this on a
yeah.
commercial. It looks like it's going to work for me.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and it's also like not only is it that, I think it's also like you said, it's like cost, right?
Mm,
I feel like a lot of the hybrid programs are significantly cheaper, right? Which makes sense because having somebody in an online classroom versus in person is very different cost structure. But I also, yeah, I think that I mean in general with like college getting so expensive and graduate school generally being something that you're paying for on your own,
hmm
as opposed to like, getting a lot of scholarship or having parents help with, then it makes a lot of sense.
And even as we see, at the time of which we're having this conversation and not knowing the future of higher education funding, particularly those
Mhm.
that historically have gone to get graduate degrees that relied on some form of federal funding, this flexible hybrid option is going to get even more appeal because individuals are going to pay out of pocket. I mean, one of the things I share with people is around 60% of individuals who pursue graduate degrees take out student loans. And so, if we know people
Mhm.
are going to continue to take out loans and not be reliant upon federal funding in that way, at least the grants and fellowships, then this option is going to become a little bit more appealing because they're saying, I still have a need. I still have problems that I
Mhm.
want to solve. I still have skill sets that I want to get or improve. And so, this option can meet that. And I don't have to go anywhere. I can carve out some time at 8 to 9 p.m. if I'm doing asynchronous. Maybe a 6 p.m. class works better for my schedule. And
Mhm.
particularly because we're talking about the cost factor, right? Like for institutions, that's not a class seat that you have to get. That's not a classroom you have to book. That's not a faculty member you have to ensure that they have any types of resources within the classroom to be able to carry out the functions of instruction. So it just all around, I think, provides a really good option for people.
Yeah. Yeah, so tell me a bit. I mean, let's like, I want to dig in a little bit on, basically like, what do you feel like are the most common types of hybrid and online programs, or like whether that's, what like that's sort of what you're seeing as like the types of programs? Because I don't see as many online ones as I used to, but I'm sure that they exist, and I just am maybe not in the market, target market. And then also kind of like what industries they're in, right? Like, is it like a hybrid MBA? Is it like a hybrid, like, for some kind of graduate school? Like, what are you seeing right now as the trend?
So in terms of trends, it's really kind of all over. We're seeing a growing popularity of the what we can say is the accelerated. That's another terminology you will see often is the accelerated MBA, the accelerated doctorate. And basically what they're doing is they're just decreasing the amount of hours that you need to take in order for you to be able to accomplish it, completing the degree quicker.
Hmm.
And typically, instead of a traditional 16-week semester, your semester is now broken up into 8 weeks. So you'll take a class on a particular topic for 8 weeks, and then you switch the next 8 weeks, and then you still follow the traditional breaks that you would in a 16-week semester. But because you're breaking it down in such a shorter time span, you're able to get through more courses faster. And so that is, I see, one of the trends that is happening is people are really looking at these accelerated programs, particularly in the doctorate and the MBA programs, engineering. A lot of the STEM
Hmm.
fields are getting some um, interest. Now, in terms of is there more online versus hybrid? I think it just depends on the institution. Some institutions have the
Hmm.
resources and supports to be able to allow for online learning because it's not as simple as saying click on a Zoom and let me teach you something. There's a whole segment of
Right.
IT department and online learning professionals who help create this structure in this online environment in a way that can function really well and allow for the bandwidth, allow for the development that we would expect to receive in person, but just in a different format. And what I often remind
Hmm.
people that I think is part of the appeal too across the board is that it allows individuals across multiple learning styles to be able to have an opportunity. And I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing more of this too is, if I'm a type of person who just, you give it to me and I choose my own adventure, then online programs are going to be great for you, especially asynchronous. But
Right.
if you love
Or if you
the,
need like a really flexible schedule, right? Right. Like you
yeah,
work retail and you can't really like commit to that time.
yeah. Then these programs are going to be appealing, right? And so the hybrid piece of it too that I really particularly enjoy is that for the person who says I've always wanted to get a graduate degree from this type of institution, I take University of Alabama as a great example. I know they have a number of hybrid programs where individuals are saying I've always wanted to get a degree from the University of Alabama or from a four-year institution that is very popular and well known, but I don't want to go live in where the institution is, right? Like I don't see myself moving there.
Yeah.
So here's a great opportunity for me to get and tap into the brand and the network while also getting the degree. And when I take that and start promoting and sharing that out on my resume or my CV, people are going to see the institution name before they ever see the degree. And they're not questioning whether or not to the same degree, was this an in person? Was this online? What? Tell me more about this, right? And so I think that's where
Right.
we're seeing the growth happen as well. But in terms of are there any one institutions, and we're seeing, I mean, you have your for profits, right? So your Grand Canyons, your Liberty Universities are seeing their population of enrollment grow. But at the same
Right.
time, it is to me the most important thing for any person who's considering this is time to completion. Really thinking about
Mhm.
how long is it going to take you. Sure, everything can be marketed in a certain way, but what is it when you're actually in the experience matters more.
Yeah. And it's also like, basically, do you see kind of this as like a transaction where you're gonna like do this thing and then come out of it on the other side, like getting an outcome, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, having University of Alabama on your resume and being able to leverage that into like getting a better job, right? Um, I think that's like the other side of it too, is just like having a clear line to that outcome that you want.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, you got to know what your professional goals are and being able to
Mhm.
find a degree that will help you to accomplish those goals. One of the interesting things I'm also seeing is that I think directly connects to why we're seeing more people interested in online and hybrid programs is employers' attitudes have changed around this. There was a survey about over 85% of employers have hired people who graduate with online degrees, So that was always
Oh,
one of the
cool.
challenges and
That's a lot.
issues that we had, right? Was that employers were not looking at online degrees as favorable as something that they think of high value. And now that has changed because they even partner with many of these institutions that offer completely online programs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely changed. I mean, I also think that there's a lot of signal, for lack of a better word, that like you get as an employer where somebody's like, you know, using their spare time not to like watch TV or go like to the bar, but to actually like work on themselves, right? And like improve. And I think that means a lot, right? And then, the other side of it is I have a feeling as college gets more expensive, there's eventually going to be some kind of breaking point where most like going to a 4-year college is no longer this automatic thing that you do, right? It doesn't make sense for everybody. And then so then those kind of programs will be like in the middle of like going to 4-year university with $40,000 a year or going to nothing,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of like a halfway point.
No, I would agree. And even to expand on that, it's going to provide another alternative that will make the market more competitive. Because if I got to choose between
Yeah.
an in-person or online environment, and I'm factoring in cost, I'm factoring in geographic location, I'm factoring in favorability, value, as well
Mm.
as my employability with the degree overall, if it can work within the confines of what matches my checklist of needs, then I'm going to choose the option that's going to work best for me. And, one of the things that online programs provide is that for certain people who may not need the entire degree, like you might be able to get an online graduate certificate, you may be able to get an additional specialty in the area where that may be a little more complicated within the traditional 4 year undergraduate degree or a traditional 2 year or multi-year doctoral degree. It just really going to depend on what those goals are and those needs are for the person.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so yeah, that's maybe the where I want to go next, right? So how do you determine if one of these programs is right for you? Because I think if you're looking at like a normal grad school, you would like, you'd go to their website, you'd kind of like look up stuff, but you also have a lot to go off of from their existing reputation, right? And then you would like go visit the campus maybe and like things like that. I mean, a hybrid program, you could still visit the campus, so that's still valid. But a lot of these programs are newer, so how does that change how you research them? And then also, for a fully online program, how do you get a sense, well, really for either type of program, like how do you get a sense for what it's going to be like to be a student there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so the traditional path that we may take in graduate education is and regardless of institutional type or program type, all of us start with the same place, and that is going to the website. And so what that's one thing that doesn't differ regardless if you're doing online, in person, or hybrid. Now, what you're
Mm,
looking for the student component, some of that networking, that development naturally takes place more seamlessly in the in-person environment, whereas in the online environment, hopefully you're connecting with the folks. Now, if you're doing a synchronous program, naturally you're going to have conversations and connections and hopefully build community with individuals within the program. But when you're in an asynchronous format, sometimes you're
mhm.
confined to just knowing a name of a person. And so that makes it a little bit different in terms of being able to build that connection and community to the institution and the program. Now, in terms of how do people begin to really decide what is the right option for me, one of the things I encourage people to do, and I talk about this in the book, in one of the chapters I talk about, should you do a accelerated program or an online program or something
Mhm.
different? And what I talk about in that chapter is really number one, identifying yourself as a learner. When you think about the environments where you thrive at as a learner, what does that look like? Does that look like a lecture
Mhm.
style? Does that look like a video? Does it look like talking on chat boards? Does it look like
Mhm.
responding to people? What is your familiarity with doing instruction online? Are you very comfortable with it? Are you uncomfortable with it? Some of even the basic things that people really need to think about is, where do you live and do you have access to good the internet, right? Like if you don't have access to a good internet or to a computer or some type of
You can watch the videos at a minimum, right?
yeah, right.
Or
Like you
and
got to
also
be able to.
particularly like, can you have internet at home or do you have to like, go to the library, right?
Correct. And so that's one of those small things that people can overlook when they're trying to make the decision. Where again, if you're in person, you don't have to think about that as much because you know what's already there to you. Like an in person institution may have a resource lab or a library services that will say, hey, come check out a laptop. That same service isn't available in the online format. The expectation is you're coming with your technology and that you're not only coming with it, but you have familiarity with it and understand what's expected of you to how to use this. And
Right.
so that's something that people really need to strongly consider as they're making their decision. Cost is another one. And I always encourage people, if you have the ability to connect with someone who has done a graduate degree online, talk to them about their experience. Talk about some of the
Mhm.
successes of it, the challenges of it, things they wish they would have known. Is you're talking to recruiters, because for a lot of these programs, they are working with another business that is working on behalf of that program or institution. And they may not have ever taken the classes from that program, but they're at least familiar with what the program is looking for, what they're interested in. And so one of the questions for those recruiters is to talk and see if they can connect you with a current student or an alum of that program to be able to understand better, or a faculty member as well, to understand what it's like to be a student in that classroom beyond what I just talked about in terms of your learning style. And then the next one is your timeline. Knowing what your
Mhm.
timeline is, and can this program, whether it be online or hybrid, help you to stay as close to within your timeline as possible. Now, there are some factors that are obviously going to be
Right.
beyond your control, right? Like when you're doing a dissertation, you're not fully in control of all those timelines, but generally you can get a sense of this, and think about some of the other needs that you may have that this online or hybrid program can provide you with. One of the things I tell people is, let's say you got an interest in something completely different, but you have the option to take some electives. Would you be willing to use one of those electives to explore that option that you have an interest in as a way to continue to build your own personal portfolio and brand and knowledge and skill set? And so I think that's the beauty of these programs, especially when you're doing like the 8 weeks, because you can hop into something for 8 weeks and then say, hey, I got what I needed, and now I'm transitioning into something different.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all like really good points. I mean, I think the biggest thing is like, I mean, you were talking about how basically you've got to be thinking about like all these different factors as you're going into it. I think the biggest thing is just to have a plan, right?
Absolutely.
I think, oh, I want to go to graduate school. Well, okay, but like it's, it's a ton of your time and money. So like you should really have a plan to make the most of it. And that plan should include the preparation of like, when am I actually going to work on this? Like, can I, block out Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. like for a week without signing up for the school? And like, will that work for me, right? And will I have like, can I, try and join some like free online lectures or something and like see if that'll work for me and like see if that's a format that's going to work or if I need it to be in person, right? Like, I think um, you know, the alternative a lot of times to these type of programs is like a local community college or a local college, right? Like instead. So you might need to do that if you want to get the learning experience you want. So that's all I think, just like, yeah, it's just like do your homework. This is a big decision, right?
The hybrid piece of it, right? So the expectation is that at some point you're gonna have to go to the campus location of the program that you're a part of. And do you have the
Yeah.
financial means to do that? If you're a person with a family, is the family coming or are you staying by yourself? How long do you have to go, right? The graduation ceremony is going to be in a completely different location. And are you prepared to be able to go do that? If it's an entire weekend or if it's an entire week, can you take time off of work to be able to do those things? It gets exciting when you say, oh, I can be done with this doctoral degree in 3 years. Yeah, but within those 3 years, you've got to go 6 times. Right? And so, will your schedule, will your finances, will your health, and anything else that connects to your ability to function in life be able to work in conjunction with your decision to now have to go attend to those like in person requirements.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I also think the other thing too, in addition to kind of thinking about um like that travel is like it's gonna, that's like gonna just take up all your paid time off, right? Like or a fair amount of it. So it's like, okay, you really are gonna be committing not just the time that you're in class and also like the money for the program. It's also like the opportunity cost of like, I could have gone and hung out with my friends that night or whatever, right? Or
Yeah,
I could have, gone to like my rec soccer league or whatever it is. So you just have to be like willing. You have to go in with your eyes open on that.
yeah, and knowing that one of the things that I jokingly tell people because I did an online master's degree, and so one of the things that I recognize from my own experience is that when you're in a traditional setting like I did for my PhD, if there's a weather issue, if there's a family issue, if there's an institutional issue in which the institution closes, or you need a little bit more flexibility around your assignments or ability to get to the campus, those options will be provided to you. When you're in the online environment, when you get your assignments on Monday, it doesn't matter what the weather is. It doesn't matter what's going on with your family. It's still due on Saturday, 11:59 p.m. And so that is something that I think can be a bit of a trip for a lot of people, bit of a hurdle, is because they come into it with these undergrad expectations of flexibility, of a lot of being able to kind of command their lives. Like if you come as a
Mhm.
professional into this environment where you are highly successful and you make a lot of decisions, and now you're in this space where you now need to respond to two people on the discussion board, and then they got to respond to you, and what that doesn't happen in the time period of which you like. And so being able to make that
Well, right, and
adjustment
if
can be
you
hard.
put off your question until the very last, you put off your like homework assignment until like 2 hours before it's due, you don't have time to like get that feedback, right?
Absolutely. And having the expectation that your faculty member is there at 9 p.m. on a Saturday, ready to respond to your email is unrealistic, right? Like these things just don't happen in that way. And so even the structure of like um faculty members availability looks different in the online environment. Like in person, you for the most part might be working with the same set of faculty over and over, but in some online
Mhm.
environments or programs, you are working with a lot of adjuncts. So this person only teaches this one class, and they might not have the same connection in to the program as say a person who's in a traditional in person program.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next question was not just about like professors, right? Like like that's definitely important that you might have a professor that this is a side gig for them, so they're not that engaged or they don't respond to you right away. But I also wonder how it affects like the students, right? Because when you're in a 4-year program or if you're in a dedicated full-time 2-year graduate school program, um, everybody's there to do that. So you can call up your buddy and be like, hey, we got this thing to do in 2 days. You want to work on it together? And they'll be like, oh yeah, like they don't have other stuff going on. Versus I feel like in a hybrid or online program, quite a lot of people are going to have jobs. Quite a lot of people are going to have, like, people might have families. And so you might hit someone up and be like, hey, this is due in 2 days. Do you want to work on it? And he might not even reply to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm curious kind of how do you learn more as you're going into or evaluating these programs about what like the other students are like and kind of what like the student experience is going to be like working with the other students.
Yeah, it's one of those that sometimes you don't know until you get into it. If you
Hmm.
are in a program where, well, I don't say if, but you might find yourself in a program where there are individuals whose work backgrounds, whose experiences are in the same field as yours, but their specific jobs and backgrounds may be completely different. And so even their expectations and availability may be different. And that is one of the things that people should consider is if I am then is expected to do group work, if I'm expected to engage with other people, how do I want to show up as a student in this experience? what commitments am I willing to make? What boundaries do I need to set for
Mhm.
myself in terms of if assignments are due again, for my example of Saturday, 11:59, that was mine, then am I a hard stop on Friday? And how do I communicate that to individuals who I don't see on a regular basis? So, in person,
Yeah, yeah.
again, I can catch you after class because I know I'm going to see you and say, let's go ahead and start establishing this time. But in the completely online environment, it's going to look a little bit different. And so, one of the things I encourage students to think about as what it's like to be in that environment is consider yourself joining any type of Zoom meeting, right? Like if you've done a Zoom meeting for your employer
Yeah.
or you've attended an event and you know that some people take up a lot of space, some people don't say a lot at all, you have to remember that you're in charge of your own learning and your own engagement. So, thinking about where do I want to enter in with engagement? How much do I want to talk? How much do I want to learn and share? What those things look like. And so it may require you to do something different that you're not used to normally doing. And that can be, a bit of a challenge for some people, but I think it's also very rewarding because they learn. To me, one of the best things about it is that you become very familiar with the technological tools that are available to you, and you learn very quickly kind of who likes to say things, who doesn't, what is expected of me from the faculty member or not, and what engagement I'm going to get. And you get to kind of learn to adapt. So I think the online environment requires a high level of adaptation and flexibility in ways that can
Hmm.
grow you professionally and grow you very personally.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's also you've got to kind of I think it requires that you put more effort in to get something out, right? Like I think when you're in undergrad especially, so probably still in grad school, you kind of make friends either way, right? Like, you're in class with people all the time, you're in group projects. Like there's just like a lot of like casual, natural time to do that and to like make build connections with people. And I think in a hybrid or an online program, you have to be a lot more intentional about it.
And it might not be, some people come into their experience with the intention not necessarily to make friends. I'm here to get the degree. I'm here to learn what I need to learn, and then I'm out. And you may not even learn something about a classmate until like 4 or 5 weeks in. And even then, you won't necessarily know their background. Naturally, as human beings, when we're connecting with other people, we're looking for folks of a similar identity, a similar background and experience. And sometimes in the online environment, you don't have that. You're not seeing them physically. You're not always immediately saying, hey, you said that in class. I want to talk to you more about that. And you have that conversation as you're going to the parking lot, or you have that conversation at that moment before class, or these things don't happen in this type of similar process in the online environment. As you mentioned, you've got to be more intentional. And I also share with people, it requires to me, a higher level of discipline because you
Mhm.
know for a fact that there is not only the expectation, but you are responsible for ensuring that everything is going to happen in a way that even if a faculty member is not as responsive, the expectation is for you to do the work. And so that I think could be hard for some people because they are used to being, I don't want to say coddled, but they are used to a different level of external accountability and support that may not show itself up in the same environment. But for the person who is
Yeah.
very autonomous, who's highly disciplined, and is like, this is what I want. I know what to do when it's due. I know how I want to connect with people, who I want to connect with. Then this could be great. For me, it was like that. I loved it. I got my assignments on Sunday. I was done by Thursday, so I can go and enjoy my weekend.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Well, great. Yeah, I think this is all really good advice. And I guess is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you wanted to make sure we covered before we wrap up?
One of the things I want to talk to people about is there's three other aspects of this that I want people to strongly consider. Number one is make sure you're looking at the accreditation of institutions and programs. Unfortunately, there are some institutions and programs that have been known to be very predatory. And as we're continuing to extrapolate and remove those programs, there are instances where this happens, where and I can think about people that I had even coached to help get into a program that works best for them now. And we talk through this, looking at their accreditation, looking at the time to completion, asking some very critical questions to ensure that this program is going to be here throughout the time that you're done and that they have done the things that are necessary for them to be be able to receive the value that they proclaim. The next thing I would talk to people about is really understanding accessibility in this. Um, Not all programs are created the same. And so as a result, if you have particular accessibility needs, particular um, um, challenges or needs around things to help you to function every single day, to show up in an environment, I encourage people to really explore that and ask questions. Look for the places where those resources are located for folks. And then the last piece I would encourage people to really think about is the cost. And the cost is not just but for tuition and fees, but also looking at the cost of what you're providing or having to invest with yourself personally. When you decide to do any graduate degree, you are choosing to add to what you already know, and you're also adding to your schedule in ways that may be very different. And for working professionals,
Mhm.
if your life or your primary responsibilities are work and maybe your family, and now you're adding school, you've got to carve out time for this. That's why my suggestion to people is always to take in that time period between when you're applying and when you get admitted and start. I always recommend people carve out an hour a day for about 3 to 5 days a week and just focus on
Mhm.
reading. Maybe you do only reading one day and then do writing the next day. Or maybe it's a combination of both, because I want you to get into the habit of being a student again and being a scholar. And that period of transition is can be very challenging for people, in the sense that as soon as they hit it, I often hear this, people are exhausted that first semester, like, I didn't know it was going to be this intense. And part of that's because they didn't make adjustments. And so they didn't think about
Mhm.
the other opportunity costs that was associated with deciding to pursue this degree. But definitely check out the tuition and fees. See what your fees are paying for, see what you get access to, both what they share, and even having conversations. Like, I think about other forms of software that you may have a pay subscription as an individual. Hey, do we now get access to this? Do we get discounts to certain things? These are some of the other added advantages that I think online and hybrid programs provide people with. I think it's a really great option. I personally feel like it's going to be a growing option, especially in lieu of what we see happening within the Department of Education, or what we know as the Department of Education. This is
Mhm.
going to continue to see a surge, because I know there are more working professionals, especially, who want the credential. They want the degree, they want the brand name, they want the network and the skills. And so they may have to find themselves upskilling. They may find themselves saying, I've been let go of my position and now is the time for me to go get that doctorate. Or I've always wanted to be a faculty member. What's the quickest path or another path for me to get there? It's going to be one of these programs. And so that's kind of my final advice for people as they're thinking about this. But there's a lot of rewards around it. I tell people all the time, I'm thankful that I had that experience. I've taught students in an asynchronous and synchronous, graduate students in asynchronous and synchronous method of instruction. And it's very enjoyable, but you've got to be disciplined. You've got to be ready. You've got to make sure that this is exactly what you want to do and you can thrive in that environment. If you don't thrive in online environments, then this might not be the best method for you to choose in terms of pursuing graduate school.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been GRE Snacks, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Justin Grimes from Apply to Graduate School. And Achievable has a great online GRE course that you can try for free by going to achievable.me.